Welcome back to Hidden Secrets. Another story, another mystery. Let's begin. For 10 years, I carried heavy trays, wiped grease off marble tables, and smiled while the owner called me worthless trash in front of the lunch rush. Yesterday, he fired me and threw a handful of change at my face, screaming that I'd never be more than a servant. He doesn't know that I don't just work here, I own the entire block. My name is Silas Vane. To the regulars at the Gilded Bistro in downtown Chicago, I was just the guy with the gray tie. I've spent a decade in this building. I know every creak in the floorboards, every leaky pipe in the basement, and every dark secret hidden behind the kitchen doors. 10 years ago, I inherited a massive real estate portfolio from my grandfather. Most people in my position would have bought a yacht and disappeared to the Mediterranean. But my grandfather was a man who believed in street-level wisdom. Before he passed, his will had one strange condition. I couldn't touch the liquid assets of his estate until I had worked 10 consecutive years in a service-level job, anonymously, to understand the people who actually make the world turn. I chose the Gilded Bistro. It's a high-end steakhouse located on the ground floor of the Vane Plaza, a building I technically own, though the management is handled through a dozen anonymous shell companies and a very tight-lipped legal firm called Sterling and Associates. The restaurant's owner is a man named Byron Thorne. Byron is the kind of guy who wears $3,000 suits but refuses to pay his kitchen staff a living wage. He's a bully, a narcissist, and honestly, a terrible businessman. He bought the lease 8 years ago, and from day one he treated the staff like property. "Silas, you're moving like a turtle. Table 5 has been waiting for their Malbec for 3 minutes. Byron's voice boomed across the dining room. I checked my watch. It was 12:45 p.m. The Malbec had been on the table for 2 minutes. I just bowed my head slightly. "Right away, Mr. Thorne." "Don't right away me, you old goat," Byron sneered, loud enough for a group of corporate lawyers at the booth to chuckle. "You've been here 10 years and you're still just a waiter. That tells me everything I need to know about your brain. You're lucky I keep you around for the senior discount on your soul." I didn't say anything. I just kept serving. I had exactly 24 hours left until my 10-year requirement was fulfilled. I had been planning my exit for a long time, but I hadn't planned on what happened next. A young woman, a new hostess named Maya, accidentally tripped while carrying a stack of menus. She brushed against Byron's sleeve. A tiny drop of water, literally just a drop, landed on his silk cuff. Byron went ballistic. He grabbed Maya by the arm, his face turning a deep shade of purple. "Do you have any idea what this suit costs? It's more than your family makes in a year. You're clumsy, you're stupid, and you're fired." Maya started to cry, apologizing profusely. The entire restaurant went silent. It was uncomfortable, even for the high society diners. "Mr. Thorne," I said, stepping between him and Maya. My voice was calm, but the waiter mask was starting to slip. "It was an accident. The floor is freshly waxed. I'll pay for the cleaning." Byron turned his rage on me. "You'll pay? With what? Your tips. You're pathetic, Silas. You're a loser defending another loser. You know what? You're done too. Get out. Take your apron off and get out of my restaurant before I call security to drag you to the curb." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a handful of loose quarters and dimes, and chucked them at my chest. They clattered onto the floor. "There's your severance pay. Now crawl out of here." I looked down at the coins, then I looked at Byron. For the first time in a decade, I didn't bow. I stood up straight, and suddenly I seemed much taller than him. "You're making a mistake, Byron," I said quietly. "A mistake? Firing a waiter? Get lost, Silas. You're nobody." I took off my apron and folded it neatly on the bar. I walked over to Maya, handed her my handkerchief, and whispered, "Don't worry, you'll have a much better job by Monday." As I walked out of the double doors of the Gilded Bistro, I didn't head for the bus stop. I walked around the corner to the private elevator of Vane Plaza. I pulled a keycard out of my wallet, one I hadn't used in 10 years. I went up to the penthouse floor. My lawyer, Marcus Sterling, was waiting for me. He looked at my waiter's uniform and smirked. "The 10 years are up as of midnight tonight, Silas. You're officially the head of Vane Holdings. How does it feel?" I sat down in the leather chair, looking out at the city skyline. "It feels like the rent is due, Marcus. Byron Thorne's lease for the restaurant. When is the renewal date?" Marcus checked his tablet. "Actually, Silas, his lease expired 3 months ago. He's been on a month-to-month goodwill extension because we didn't have a signature from the primary owner to finalize the new 5-year contract." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Good, because as of tomorrow morning, the goodwill has officially run out. I want an eviction notice drafted, not for a month from now. I want him out by the weekend for multiple code and conduct violations. And Marcus? Yes, Silas. Call the cleaning crew. I want the locks changed at 9:00 a.m. sharp tomorrow. I have a feeling Mr. Thorne is going to have a very hard time finding a place to put his $3,000 suits. The twist was just beginning. Byron thought he was firing a servant. He was actually evicted by his own waiter. But I wasn't just going to take his building. I was going to take his dignity, his reputation, and every cent he had stolen from his employees. The next morning, Byron Thorne arrived at the Gilded Bistro at 8:30 a.m., just like he always did. He was wearing a slate gray Italian suit, whistling to himself, feeling invincible after cleaning house the day before. To Byron, firing Silas and Maya wasn't just a business move, it was a power trip that made his morning espresso taste even better. But as he reached the heavy brass-handled doors of the restaurant, something was wrong. His key wouldn't turn. He jiggled it, cursed it under his breath, and tried again. The lock was solid. It had been replaced with a high-tech biometric scanner and a heavy-duty deadbolt. What in the hell? Byron muttered, slamming his fist against the glass. He looked up and saw a man standing on the other side of the glass. It wasn't one of his line cooks. It was a man in a tactical security uniform, arms crossed, face like stone. "Hey, open up!" Byron shouted, his voice muffled by the thick, soundproof glass. "I'm the owner. There's something wrong with the locks." The security guard didn't move. Instead, another man walked into view behind the bar. He wasn't wearing a security uniform. He was wearing a charcoal bespoke suit that made Byron's expensive attire look like a cheap knockoff from a department store. Byron squinted through the glass. His heart skipped a beat. The man had the same posture, the same height, and the same steady gaze as... No, it couldn't be. The man walked to the door and pulled it open just 6 inches. It was Silas, but it wasn't the Silas who took orders. This Silas had an aura of absolute authority. "Good morning, Byron," Silas said. His voice was calm, but it carried a chill that made the morning air feel like midwinter. Byron stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. "Silas, what are you? Why are you dressed like that? And why are my locks changed? Did you break in? I'm calling the police." "Go ahead, Byron." "Call them," Silas replied, leaning against the doorframe. "But you might want to check the legal notice taped to the side window first." Byron scrambled to the large display window. There, in a transparent plastic sleeve, was a formal document bearing the seal of Vane Holdings and the signature of the city marshal. Notice of immediate eviction and lockout. This is a mistake," Byron stammered, his face turning a ghostly pale. "I have a lease. I pay my rent. Who is Vane Holdings anyway?" "I've only ever dealt with a property manager." "I am Vane Holdings, Byron," Silas said, stepping out onto the sidewalk. "The property manager you've been bullying for years works for me. My grandfather built this plaza. I own the ground you're standing on, the ceiling over your head, and currently every piece of kitchen equipment inside that building because you used them as collateral for the rent you're 3 months behind on." Byron's phone fell from his hand, clattering on the pavement. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The man he had insulted, the man he had chucked coins at, was the billionaire landlord he had been trying to impress for 8 years. "Silas, wait, let's talk about this," Byron pleaded, his voice cracking. "I was stressed yesterday. The suit, the girl, I didn't mean those things. You know me, I'm high-strung. We're a team, right? You've been my best waiter for a decade." "I wasn't your waiter, Byron. I was your observer," Silas said. "I spent 10 years learning how people like you operate. I watched you skim off the tip pool. I watched you harass the waitstaff. I watched you buy a Ferrari while your head chef was struggling to pay for his daughter's dental work. I stayed because I had to. But yesterday, when you threw that change at me, you didn't just fire a waiter. You broke the goodwill clause of your month-to-month extension." At that moment, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Marcus Sterling, the lawyer, stepped out, followed by a woman in a professional blazer. "Silas, the labor board is on line 1, Marcus said, handing Silas a phone. "And this is Sarah from the IRS. She's very interested in the secondary ledger we found in the office safe last night." Byron's eyes went wide. "You went in my safe? That's illegal. That's private property." "Actually," Marcus intervened, "per the terms of your expired lease, once an eviction for criminal conduct is initiated, the landlord has the right to secure all assets on the premises to prevent the destruction of evidence. And boy, did we find a lot of evidence." Silas looked at Byron, who was now trembling. The arrogance was gone. The king of the bistro was now just a man standing on a sidewalk, locked out of his own life. "You have 10 minutes to take your personal items from the lockers, Byron," Silas said. After that, the building is being sealed for a full forensic audit. Oh, and Maya? Maya walked out from behind the security guard, wearing a professional suit. She looked at Byron with a mix of pity and triumph. Maya is the new assistant property manager for Vane Plaza, Silas announced. Her first task is overseeing the liquidation of your assets. I think she'll be much better at it than she was at carrying menus. Byron looked from Silas to Maya, his world collapsing. He had spent his life thinking that money made him a god, only to find out that he had been serving the true god of the building for 10 years without even knowing it. This isn't over, Silas, Byron hissed, trying to regain some shred of dignity. I have friends, I have lawyers. I know your lawyers, Byron, Silas said, turning to walk back inside. I bought their firm last night. You're on your own. The heavy doors clicked shut, and for the first time in a decade, Silas Vane wasn't there to take an order. He was there to give one. But the biggest secret, the reason Silas had truly chosen Byron's restaurant for his 10-year test, was still hidden in the basement files. And it was about to change everything Byron thought he knew about his own family. Byron was gone, left shivering on the sidewalk as the morning commuters hurried past, oblivious to the fall of a tyrant. But inside the quiet, darkened dining room of the gilded bistro, I wasn't celebrating. I walked past the empty tables, my footsteps echoing on the marble I had mopped 1,000 times, and headed straight for the basement. In the sub-level of Vane Plaza, behind the massive walk-in freezers and the wine cellar, sat a heavy steel door marked Mechanical Room 4. This wasn't just a room for pipes and wires. This was where my grandfather, Arthur Vane, had kept his private archives, the records he didn't trust to the cloud or even to his lawyers. Marcus, I said into my earpiece, I'm at the vault. I need the bypass code for the Thorne file. Silas, be careful, Marcus's voice crackled. Your grandfather left a note in his digital will. He said the reason he chose Byron's restaurant for your 10-year test wasn't just to teach you humility. It was because the Thornes owed the Vanes a debt that couldn't be paid in cash. I punched in the code. The door hissed open. Inside were rows of filing cabinets dating back to the late 80s. I began pulling drawers until I found it, Project Obsidian 1988. As I flipped through the yellowed pages, my blood turned to ice. I had always been told that my grandfather and Byron's father, Julian Thorne, were business rivals, but the files told a different story. They were partners. And they weren't building restaurants. They were architects of a massive insurance fraud scheme that had systematically stripped hundreds of middle-class families of their life savings. But here was the twist. My grandfather had realized the horror of what they were doing and tried to stop it. Julian Thorne didn't like that. The records showed a series of accidents that nearly killed my grandfather, eventually forcing him to buy out Julian's shares and bury the scandal to protect the Vane name from being dragged through the mud. Byron didn't know his father was a criminal. He grew up believing he was old money royalty. But the most shocking document was at the very bottom of the folder. It was a check, signed by Julian Thorne, dated the day my parents died in that accidental car crash 25 years ago. The check was made out to a private investigator, the same one who had cleared the truck driver who hit my parents. I sat on a cold metal crate, the air in the basement feeling suddenly thin. My grandfather hadn't sent me to the bistro just to learn humility. He had sent me there to wait for the right moment to destroy the Thorne legacy once and for all. He wanted me to be inside the house when I burned it down. He knew, I whispered. Grandpa knew Byron would be just like his father. He wanted me to see the rot up close before I cut it out. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a restricted number, I answered. You think you've won, don't you, waiter? Byron's voice was distorted, shaky with a mix of rage and something that sounded like desperation. You think you can just lock me out of my life? I found my father's old special key, Silas, the one he told me to use if the Vanes ever forgot who really built that plaza. I stood up, my eyes scanning the mechanical room. Byron, where are you? I'm in the one place you never checked, Silas, the place my father built into the foundation itself. You might own the deed, but I own the kill switch. If I'm going down, Vane Plaza is coming down with me. A low, rhythmic thumping began to vibrate through the floorboards. It wasn't the elevator. It was the building's main gas intake valves, located behind a hidden wall in the very basement where I was standing. Byron had used a secondary entrance through the subway tunnels to get back into the building's infrastructure. I realized the final secret. Byron wasn't just a narcissist. He was a cornered animal who had inherited his father's darkest impulses. The restaurant was just the surface. The real war was being fought in the bones of the building. Marcus, evacuate the plaza, now. I shouted as I began tearing at a suspicious-looking panel behind the industrial water heater. Byron is in the maintenance tunnels. He's trying to blow the gas line. I found the hidden latch. The wall swung open to reveal a narrow, dimly lit crawlspace. At the end of the tunnel, I could see a figure hunched over the main pressure regulator. It was Byron, holding a heavy pipe wrench and a blowtorch. "Stop!" I yelled, crawling through the gap. "Byron, look at the files in my hand. Your father killed my parents. You're not defending a legacy, you're defending a murderer." Byron turned, the blue flame of the torch reflecting in his crazed eyes. "I don't care about the past, Silas. I care about the fact that you made me look like a fool. I was the king. I was the one who gave the orders. You were a puppet," I countered, moving slowly toward him. "Your father used the Vanes to hide his crimes, and my grandfather used you to pay for them. It ends today, Byron. Don't be the man your father was." The thumping grew louder. The smell of natural gas began to fill the crawlspace. One spark, and the center of Chicago would have a new crater. I had spent 10 years serving food. Now I had to serve a different kind of justice. The air in the crawlspace was thick with the scent of rotten eggs, the telltale sign of a massive gas leak. I could feel my lungs burning, my vision blurring as the blue flame of Byron's torch flickered dangerously close to the main valve. The vibration of the high-pressure gas was rattling my teeth. "You don't get it, do you?" Byron screamed, his voice cracking with pure insanity. "My father told me the Vanes were weak. He told me you were just caretakers of what rightfully belonged to the Thornes. I spent my life building that brand, and you took it with a single piece of paper." "Your father lied to you, Byron," I shouted, lunging forward. I didn't use a weapon. I used the weight of the Project Obsidian files. I slammed the heavy folder against Byron's arm, knocking the blowtorch to the concrete floor. The two of us scrambled in the dark, the billionaire who had spent a decade as a waiter against the narcissist who had just lost his kingdom. Silas was stronger. 10 years of carrying heavy trays and moving crates had given me a functional strength Byron's gym-sculpted body couldn't match. I pinned Byron against the vibrating gas pipe. "Look at the check, Byron. Look at the date. Your father paid to have my parents wiped off the map so he could take over the Vane estate. My grandfather didn't just hire me to work for you. He put me there to see if the poison had passed down to the next generation. And it did. You're exactly like him." Byron stared at the check on the floor, the realization finally breaking through his rage. He looked at the torch, then at me. The fight left him all at once. He slumped against the wall, sobbing like a child. He said it was an accident," Byron whimpered. "He told me the Vanes were friends." "There are no friends in your father's world, Byron. Only victims," I said. I reached over and tightened the emergency shut-off valve. The deafening vibrations slowly faded into a haunting silence. The SWAT team burst into the basement seconds later, guided by Marcus's tracking of my phone. They dragged Byron out in zip ties, not as a king, but as a broken man who had tried to destroy a city block out of spite. Weeks later, the gilded bistro remained closed. The gold leaf sign was taken down, and the windows were covered in brown paper. But the hidden secret wasn't just about the eviction or the gas leak. I sat in the penthouse office, looking at the city below. Marcus walked in with a final stack of papers. "The audit is complete, Silas," Marcus said. "Byron is looking at 20 years for attempted arson and endangerment, but there's something else. We found a hidden account in Julian Thorne's name. It wasn't just a slush fund." I opened the file. My eyes went wide. The account didn't belong to Julian anymore. It had been transferred into a trust fund 20 years ago, a trust fund for me, Silas Vane. "My grandfather didn't just bury the scandal, did he?" I asked. "No," Marcus replied. "He blackmailed Julian Thorne for every cent he stole from those families in 1988. He spent 30 years clawing that money back, bit by bit. That's why he made you work at the bistro, Silas. He needed to make sure that when you received this money, the millions stolen from those families, you wouldn't spend it on yourself. He wanted to make sure you were the kind of man who would give it back." I looked at the balance, $150 million. The test wasn't about Byron, I realized, a single tear hitting the desk. The test was about me. He wanted to know if I would become a Thorne or stay a Vane. The revenge and resolution, the next day I didn't reopen the bistro. Instead, I announced the formation of the Vane Restitution Foundation. Every family affected by the 1988 insurance scam received a life-changing check. And for Maya, I didn't just make her an assistant, I gave her the deed to the restaurant space. She turned the gilded bistro into Maya's kitchen, a place where the staff were partners, not servants, and where every waiter was treated with the dignity I had earned over those 10 years. As for Byron Thorne, he's currently serving his time in a state penitentiary. His job in the prison? He works in the mess hall, scrubbing floors and carrying trays for 10 cents an hour. I occasionally visit him. I don't say a word. I just sit at a table, wait for Byron to finish mopping, and drop a single, shiny quarter on the floor. "Keep the change, Byron," I whisper. "I know how hard you worked for it." True power isn't about the name on the building, it's about the character of the person inside it. Silas Vane waited 10 years to serve a dish that Byron Thorne never saw coming: justice. If you enjoyed this twisted tale of patience, karma, and the ultimate revenge, please subscribe to Hidden Secrets. We uncover the stories the world tries to bury, one twist at a time. Hit the notification bell, leave a comment about your favorite part of the story, and remember, always be kind to your waiter. You never know who really owns the building.